and states better.
It's really an interesting time in America and in American politics. Republicans
Yeah, that's fucking one way to put it, dipshit.
are governing well, and we are delivering on our promises, and we are bringing solutions, and we're working around the clock every day to make sure that that is delivered for the people as we promised them last year on the campaign trail. Meanwhile, Democrats are engaging in the applause of destruction of cities and all sorts of chaos. The contrast is so clear, and everybody can see it.
With parts of LA under curfew, 700 Marines to be deployed on Wednesday, Texas now sending in their National Guard, and more protests planned over the coming days, this is a crucial moment in Donald Trump's second term. It is a test of his presidential power and his mandate, and whether Republicans or Democrats win this argument about immigration, law and order, and democracy.
To some extent, people do like to see some action happening. They're glad to see, an activist president after what we've had for the last several years. Does he have a tendency to take that too far? Absolutely.
Dude. These guys drop the fucking ball, Channel 4. When it comes to American politics so hard, it blows my mind. Why are you asking a Republican advisor about Trump's actions? Yes, he's a fucking Liverpool fan. Great. But it's so stupid. Like, yeah, of course he's gonna be like, yeah, he sometimes gets a little heavy-handed, but, his fascist takeover is actually really popular. It's not. It's not popular at all.
I am convinced that Donald Trump would settle for 90% of what he wants. He would be hugely successful and pretty popular. The fact of the matter is that's not who he is as a person or a politician, and he insists on trying for 125% of what he wants. You look at what's happened to illegal immigration. People absolutely support closing down the borders. They absolutely support deporting criminals, especially violent criminals. They are not so excited about someone coming into, a high school graduation or a court hearing and taking people who have, for the most part, lived their lives here pretty peacefully and productively. So he does have a tendency to overplay his hand. It's interesting because so much of it depends on how the protesters, and in some case rioters, play this out over the course of the next week. To the extent that he's calling in the National Guard because property is being set on fire, people are absolutely going to support him. If the protesters would limit themselves to a peaceful march through downtown LA, and he still calls in the National Guard, then it would be a very different situation. 5 minutes from now, we could find out that there was a violent clash.
What are you talking about? That's literally what happened, and that's what's been going on, and he still deployed the fucking Marine Corps. That is what he did. What are you saying? I'm sorry, dude. If you're a fucking booker for Channel 4, you're a goddamn moron. This is not journalism. You do not have to defend the Trump administration. I thought liberals had a fucking backbone, a spine. Channel 4 is offering worse coverage on American domestic issues than it does when it comes to Israel-Palestine. How is that even possible? You did? Yes. Yes, I did. The reason for why is because under normal circumstances, like liberal institutions, especially in fucking Europe, hate Donald Trump for at least like being aesthetically a fascist and disrupting. They aesthetically hate Donald Trump, sorry, for disrupting the liberal order.
Between protesters who to that point have been peaceful and the National Guard, in which case opinion might turn against President Trump. But one of his big mandates was to deal with illegal immigration. And while he may not do it the way, sort of the sensible middle in the U.S. would prefer, he does have a mandate to deal with it. To the extent that there's, violent attempts to stop him from doing it, people will support his actions. The devil's going to be in the details over the course of the next week or two.
Going to begin with that. In Los Angeles, you know by now what's happening there. The mayor has put a curfew in place downtown last night just to try and stop the violent protest against President Trump's immigration crackdown. The LAPD announced it was initiating mass arrests. In the meantime, thousands of people marched peacefully. Peacefully is a word here in other cities, including Dallas, Chicago, San Francisco, and right here in New York. Jonathan Bigliotti is in downtown LA for us covering the story. He spoke with the city's police chief about the thousands of troops that President Trump sent to his city. Jonathan, good morning. Very curious to hear what the chief had to say.
Yeah, and good morning to you, Gail. The police chief saying that the National Guard staged behind me at no point since they arrived here on the ground provided assistance to the city with these protests.
Except
there is a
apparently
curfew
they have.
in effect. It remains in effect this morning, and it has been effective. Much calmer overnight than previous nights. The LAPD confirming dozens of people were arrested.
No, I thought this too, but turns out National Guard troops in Los Angeles have temporarily detained civilians before turning them over to law enforcement. Which is, I'm fairly certain, not legal. National Guard can offer look, federalized National Guard can offer aid to federal agencies when they're conducting these raids. Now, the raids themselves are immoral, unconscionable, unjustifiable, illegal. Sure. Okay? But if you're looking at the letter of the law, technically, as far as I understand, federalized National Guard units can offer protection to federal agents. ICE are federal agents. So they can partner with ICE and go on these raids to offer protection to ICE. However, the National Guard cannot detain citizens. The National Guard, unless directed by the state, but the federalized National Guard and the Marines especially cannot detain citizens. They cannot arrest citizens. Arresting is performing law enforcement duties. Okay? An arrest or a detainment is a law enforcement duty. What this suggests is that they are doing something that is illegal. Unless Trump declares an insurrection. Under the Posse Comitatus Act, it is illegal for the Army or any, the National Guard would be, as a federalized unit, would be basically the equivalent of the military or the Army in this situation, are now allowed to make law enforcement, any kind of acts that normally would be conducted by law enforcement. That's wrong, bro. The National Guard is outside of every major concert event, and they're definitely able to detain anybody they seem as a threat. That doesn't mean you can fucking walk into a federal building and assume that they can't detain you. They can. And also, what you're describing is state-sanctioned National Guard. What you're talking about is when the state is deploying the National Guard to conduct, I assume, to aid and abet the police. I can't speak on your own personal experience. I don't know exactly what it was. But National Guard can aid in crowd control, especially if they've been mobilized by the governor. Yeah, the Posse Comitatus Act is a law that generally prevents the president from using the military as a domestic police force. There's a new legal
It's
on
an
the...
emergency, rebellion, an insurrection, and clearly an invasion of Mexicans. Just look at all those flags.
They're not a city of immigrants, they're a city of criminals.
According to Donald Trump, Los Angeles is a war zone, and the only thing that can restore order is thousands of soldiers and hundreds of Marines patrolling the streets. Also, the only way to stop a fire is by lighting a match. Last Friday, President Trump sent heavily armored ICE agents in to conduct immigration raids in densely populated neighborhoods in and around Los Angeles without informing local law enforcement or city authorities. He claimed to be liberating the city from dangerous migrants, the worst of the worst, including dozens of textile factory workers, a bunch of laborers outside a Home Depot, and this guy selling fruit on the street corner. Protests immediately erupted across the city and were predominantly peaceful. The few of them were not, including the downtown protest where about 5 parked robo-taxis were lit on fire, which, if you know anybody from Los Angeles, that's kind of a thing they do there, especially when the Lakers win the championship. But that didn't stop the Trump administration from jumping at the opportunity to grab power away from the states, even when the Constitution pretty clearly forbids it. He's also mobilized the National Guard outside of his authority, threatened to arrest Governor Gavin Newsom, and mobilized 700 active duty Marines to support ICE, rounding up even more immigrants. Yikes. On Friday, June 6th, ICE conducted a series of immigration raids in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. According to Representative Nanette Barragan, they're going to keep this up for a month.
So we've been told to get ready for 30 days of enforcement, 30 days of ICE enforcement.
Agents swept multiple locations in the city and took at least 118 people into custody, but 3 locations became particular flashpoints. The first is a garment factory called Ambiance Apparel in the Fashion District. Agents entered the building and interrogated the workers inside, but while that was going on, a crowd of angry protesters surrounded the building. Those protesters included David Huerta, leader of the Service Employees International Union, better known as SEIU, one of the biggest labor unions in the country, who was arrested for impeding ICE agents. Bill Asaley, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of California, tweeted out a photo of Huerta after he'd been slammed to the ground in the back of a cruiser with a promise to arraign him on Monday. Ah, for the good old days, when the Justice Department manuals instruction to prosecutors that they should not make any statement or disclose any information that could have a substantial likelihood of materially prejudicing a case actually meant something. See also Rule 3.6 of the California Rules of Professional Conduct.
That is one of the, okay. When the Trump administration does shit, you can either package it under stupidity or purposeful cruelty. Sometimes it's both. But that is stupidity. It's cruelty, but it's also incredibly stupid. Because no matter how cruel you want to be, materially prejudicing a fucking court case that the Department of Justice has by having the Attorney General come out and say some fucking insane shit is going to literally drop the court case instantly. She did this, Pam Bondi did this not only with Huerta, but she also did this with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. In an effort to win the battle of public opinion, they greatly prejudiced the way that the public would receive this information by making statements, by making claims and statements about the guiltiness, the perceived guiltiness and the criminality of a person that they were charging. That right there makes it a much easier case to fucking declare mistrial over. And they still keep doing it because they're fucking stupid.
But